Record to the cloud. All right, I am live on Instagram and Facebook.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, happy Friday, Facebook and Instagram. Bree with Apollo here with Melissa McDaniel Grisham. I'm going to have to practice that a couple more times. It's Beyond the Steps Day. It's Friday. It's your favorite day of the week because we're going into the weekend, but it's also time to chat with us for another amazing topic as we head into the 22-23 dance season. That is pretty crazy to say. Time has been flying by. I'm just waiting for our guest today and Melissa to join me here on Instagram, and then we're going to get started. So sit tight and give us a couple minutes.
I'm on the way.
And my family is on. My mom is downstairs, but my mom is logged on anyway. Hi, Mom.
She wants to participate here.
I know.
Request to join.
And I've got you, Kat, I've got you adding in now, and I'm waiting for Melissa. Let's see.
There I go.
Okay, good. Volume's down, and we're all set. There's one, and I see Melissa. Let's see. Melissa, oh, there you are.
There I am. Yeah, just like that. Hey, Instagram, how are you? It is Friday. Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. We're ready to go for Beyond the Steps today. We have a great show for you with Dr. Kathleen Bowers, and we are going to get started in just a second. I see Instagram. Y'all are coming. Hello, everyone. Hello. Logging on. Our Facebook friends are coming on over here. Make sure you're sharing this episode before we get started so everyone can see everything from the beginning. Make sure that I'm not getting any feedback here.
Yeah, so we have a cool topic today, y'all. We are going to be talking about, to Dr. Bowers today, and we're going to tell you about her in a minute. But we're talking today about the most common misconceptions that we experience between dance professionals and educators and dance medicine professionals. Melissa, we've talked about this a lot. There's kind of like this overwhelming gap, right? Between, we lost Kat on Instagram here. There's an overwhelming disconnect between the dance medicine world, and it's like the information that we're getting is not resonating within the dance community and not translating downward, right? And we have to kind of figure out why if we want to take those steps forward, like we always talk about. But hopefully Dr. Kat is going to be able to shed some light on that for us. Sorry, you guys, we're having technical difficulties. You know, it wouldn't be a Friday without it.
It wouldn't. Hey,
there she is. Is that better? Can you hear and see us okay?
But it's not letting me turn my volume all the way up.
If you turn it down, you're still going to hear it a little bit. So don't worry about it. It should be very slight, but as long as you have your headphones in it, you shouldn't have the reverb. Okay, guys, let's get started. So again, welcome. I'm Bree with Apollo. This is Melissa McDaniel Grisham, my dear friend and partner for Beyond the Steps. This is Beyond the Steps. Every Friday we meet and we talk about topics that are affecting the dance community in anything from racism, gender inequity, sex abuse and prevention, which has been a huge hot button issue, nutrition, psychology, and of course, dance medicine and science, where we live with Apollo. We're so excited to be chatting today with Dr. Kathleen Bowers. She is the founder of the Dance Docs podcast. And we're talking today about the most common misconceptions we see between dance professionals and educators in dance medicine and science professionals. As Melissa and I were just kind of explaining, there's a huge gap, I feel like, in the research being done in dance medicine and science and how that's trickling down to impact us in real world situations in the dance community. So we're going to talk about things we can do at the studio level and at the professional level to help mitigate that and hopefully close that gap so that we can get that information faster and take the changes, make the changes we need to be able to move forward and evolve as a dance community. So Melissa, without further ado, why don't you introduce Dr. Kat?
I am super excited to introduce Dr. Kat Bowers. She's a physical therapist, former director of the of dance medicine for the Miami City Ballet, a Pilates instructor, and a dancer turned endurance athlete. And also the host, as Bree mentioned, of the Dance Docs podcast. She has a doctorate in physical therapy from the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences and a bachelor's degree in dance science from California State University in Long Beach. Cali girl, love it out there. Wonderful weather. Love it. I'm jealous of you right now. For over a decade, Dr. Kat has been training, educating, and guiding dancers and practitioners through a holistic approach to optimize performance and prevent the fit but unhealthy athlete. And that, I definitely want to touch on that. Fit but unhealthy athlete. Kat, thank you so much for being here with us today. We are so happy to have you.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be working with Apollo this year on the podcast a little bit, and super excited to sit down with all your listeners today.
Wonderful. Thank you. So we know, and we say this all the time, dancers are the toughest athletes in the world. We like to say some of the toughest, but I believe we are the toughest athletes in the world.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, hands down. You can dispute me later. But talk to us a little bit about how an athlete can be fit but unhealthy, because I think that's very important, like I said, to kick off this conversation.
Oh, such a good question to start with. When I think of the fit but unhealthy athlete, I think of a category that I've fallen into. And I fell into actually in my endurance life, carrying a lot of these habits that I learned as a dancer growing up. I carried into endurance athletics. But really, when we dive into the fit but unhealthy athlete, from the outside, you look like you're at the top of your game, right? You have the, everything they're looking for. You're strong, you can do everything we're looking for, but you're plagued by injuries. You're probably undernourished, right? So we're not fueling your system the way we need to. Mental health game really isn't there. And so it's really kind of this holistic approach of you define health, or how I define health in a dancer, and how do we make sure that we're touching and keeping you full in all of those aspects, instead of just looking okay on the outside and having all these kind of things kind of crumbling underneath you from the inside out.
Do you find it hard? Because I mean, of course, I'm going to use my family. So my son plays football, and it's like, hey, listen, you need to eat this before you go. You need to make sure that you don't starve yourself all morning and then just eat a Nutri-Grain bar. You need to drink water. And he's like, I've been fine. I did it last practice and I did it this practice. And yeah, eventually you're going to totally like disintegrate. Do you find it hard to reach people who have been doing these unhealthy behaviors this whole time and still seemingly performing at a top level? How do you get them to understand that just because they don't see it now, that's going to break you down eventually?
Yeah. It's interesting when we look at, especially the female athlete, we see a lot of these signs come on sooner. So we can look at menses, right? So when a female, you should have a regular cycle every month. And if that cycle is starting to change, if it's starting to become lighter, if it's starting to, it goes away, right? You maybe a dancer had a period for a year or two, they've upped their training and now they've lost their period again. That tells me kind of right away that there's an issue.
Interesting.
And so, that to me is a big sign of we need to get you in to make sure that you're taking in the nutrients you need, because what happens is it doesn't seem like a big issue in that moment, but especially between the ages of like 20 to 25 for our female athletes, we're looking at bone health. This is when you build the most of your bone health. And so if you're in this phase of disordered eating, you're not enough, then we really start looking at long-term, maybe when you're in your 30s, your 40s, that's when we start to see more of these problems.
Right.
Popping up, training for my Ironman a couple months afterwards. I was like ramping everything back up, and I fell and I ended up fracturing my ankle. And suddenly they were like, oh, look at all these issues, just because I thought I was eating enough, but I really wasn't. And so I've really kind of started looking more at dancers' diets and talking to them. And that whole like, I eat a little bit in the morning and then I eat more later in the day. And then, I just have a big dinner versus having kind of those small meals throughout the day is really, really a challenge.
Yeah, thank you. So for those just joining, I'm Bree with Apollo, chatting with my partner, Melissa McDaniel Grisham, and we're chatting with Dr. Kat Bowers today about the misconceptions, the biggest misconceptions we see between dance professionals and educators, and then professionals in the dance, medicine, and science community, and how to kind of bridge that gap a little bit. So diving right in, Kat, dance medicine has evolved so much over the last 20 years. Why do you think the dance industry as a whole has been kind of slow to catch up to the research that's been done?
Yeah, so I was actually thinking about this because you gave me a few questions to think about beforehand. IADA was formed in 1990, so we're going on really like 30 years from the medical side of things into the like in bridging the gap with the dancers and the educators.
And I'm going to stop you because
things.
explain IADAMS for anybody watching that doesn't know. It's the International Association of Dance, Medicine, and Science, right? So we finally refer to it as IADAMS for those that may have never heard that before.
Yeah, exactly. And what I love about IADAMS is it's not just the science professionals. This is for the educators. This is, we want to get everybody involved to help build and bring up very healthy dancers. And I remember being at my very first IADAMS conference and I was presenting and I was like shaking in my boots, and I was talking to somebody else and I was like, oh, I'm presenting later. And he looked at me and he said, Maird. And suddenly it was like, we're all in this together. Oh, we're all in this together. So I highly recommend, if you haven't checked out IADAMS, check them out because it is a great resource for all our people. But 30 years of trying to bridge this gap. I remember graduating in 2008 with my dance science degree. Nobody knew what it was. And we are seeing kind of this evolution. Like now people are like, oh, that's so cool. Right. They know what it is, that it's really kind of a combination of a dance major. So you have all of the coursework and curriculum and technique classes that a dance major would have, performance credits, all of that combined with a kinesiology degree, right? So
cool.
You've had all the biomechanics and the anatomy and the motor learning. And so really it's teaching this group of individuals, how do we create healthy dancers? Right, looking from kind of the science side and the performance side and bringing the two together. And so, I find in my own experience, it's the professionals who come in and it's kind of like it's my way or the highway, right? I know exactly what I'm doing and I'm not open to listening to other areas, or this is how what I hear a lot is, this is how we've always done it and this is how I'm going to continue to do it, and that's it. And so I think it's really about working with educators as a PT, and also with them, both of us being open to say, we understand the history of dance and how it's evolved, but here's maybe how we can continue to advance it forward.
Yeah, I love that. Well, that's a good segue into my next question, because the reality is there's a ton of talk now, more than ever, about health and wellness in the dance community, and not just from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint and nutritional standpoint, all the things, right? But when it comes to backing that up, right, there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of conversations being had, and we can fall short in our execution and following up and being consistent with those things, because I think the foundation of dance is built on a mentality that almost counterbalances what we're trying to achieve, right? The thought process is completely counterintuitive. Like, we are built on this thought process in dance that as dancers, the old school mentality is you do what you're told. If you don't do what you're asked to do, somebody else is going to come in and take your job. And so you begin to push down all your feelings, all your anxiety, all your physical ailments, and go, I'm just going to power through this, which is totally against where we're going as a community now. Right. So talk a little bit about some of the changes you think need to be made. We're going to tackle the studio level, dance competitions and conventions, and also, at the professional level. So let's start with the studio level. What are some changes that need to be made in your opinion there?
Yeah, I think,
These things cross over
about this question, a lot of these things cross over between all three groups.
I think
There's, I think for me, I think of the mental health component is probably one of the biggest things that we need to recognize and help our dancers with. And this feeling of perfectionism that's so driven into us. Because unfortunately, when you start really talking about perfectionism, it's not about being perfect. It's actually this internal feeling of never being good enough. And so making sure that across the board, at the studios, in the competition, in the level, right, are we providing a positive experience for our dancers, right? Do they still want to come to class? Do they still love coming to class on a regular basis, right? Are they getting positive feedback every so often? I think one of the things that I loved talking about with Scott, who's been on the podcast, is we talk about the sandwich method of giving critique. And so it's like, can you give somebody something that they did right, and then give them something that they can work on, and then end with something positive again? And it's not about just like praising people, right? But it's about being able to say, I recognize that you're working hard. This is where we can continue to work. And I want you to continue working hard for that, right? Instead of feeling like, always feeling defeated, always having that, like, this is what you need to work on, and this is what you need to work on, and this is what you need to work on. That becomes very defeating to somebody. I mean, think about if you got a paper back when you were in school, if it was covered in red ink, right, and everything's a mistake, how do you feel when that shows up, right? And so how can we maybe change that language in our dance classes, feedback that's being given at dance competitions, to continue a little bit more of a positive environment instead of one that kind of continues this challenging kind of downward cycle for a lot of dancers.
Yeah, thank you. Now, that was the studio level. So let's move to dance competitions and conventions. And I understand what you just said can kind of apply there too, but what specifically would you challenge dance competitions and conventions? Because that's a whole nother atmosphere, right? Like, I mean, let's be honest, we're all there competing for the attention of the instructors in the front of the room, everybody's fighting for that front spot. Rarely do you see, people voluntarily hanging out in the back of the room, although it's a great place to be, right? Because you have the freedom to move and all those things, but you're auditioning for scholarships and you're wanting to catch their eye. And, again, that's part of that thought process that's counterintuitive to where we're trying to go as a community. So what do you challenge them to look at more closely?
I think it's looking
at a dancer's effort, right? And knowing that that person in the middle of the room or the back of the room could be giving it 100% of their effort. And can you still find something that's going to lift them up and keep them working and keeping them driving towards wanting to be at the front of the room instead of always feeling like they're kind of in the back or they're not getting seen, or coming back to that, can you still find something positive in every performance out there instead of always just kind of going into that critique phase? And I'm going to be honest, I haven't been around the competitive dance community quite as much. I mean, so much of my career has been in the professional world, but I mean, I did dance competitions back in the day.
Yeah.
And so I do know how hard it can get when you're constantly middle of the pack.
Well, and conversely,
like
right, the challenge
that-
from the
finding that
challenge from
drive
the
to keep going.
yeah, and the challenge from the organization side is that, look, we've got so many kids in one room, a very limited amount of time. And, it's impossible to recognize every single kid in that setting. So it really is a challenge, and it becomes almost up to the student to have this like Teflon of being able to advocate for themselves, but also be able to pick themselves up and go, I am enough and I am doing great. And that's not always easy for a child to do, right? That because you have all these hormones and you have these feelings that sometimes are not rational, and you're justified and you're entitled to your feelings, but we're asking these children to do it themselves, and it's really, really difficult.
Yeah.
So
can I ask a question really quick, specifically about the
and
overall wellness and of the dance community and the responsibility of conventions and competitions? Like, do you think there will ever be a world, and you could be like, I have no idea what you're talking about, Melissa, ever be a world where there's actually like dance medicine professionals on site at conventions and
there should be.
competitions?
There should be.
There should be. There should be. Because I think there's one thing is not everybody has access to a dance medicine professional. And we're trying to make more access, but when I was growing up, it was a 15-minute appointment with a dance medicine professional that made me realize this is what I wanted to do. And so, even if it's you're at a convention and you get a 30-minute session with a PT or a MD just to address that dance specific injury or something that's been going on for a long time, I think that would be such a huge benefit to the dance community at large.
Well, and I would be remiss in not acknowledging, because this year we did see that happening. Doctors for Dancers was present at several different convention circuits, which was so nice to see, right? And so we hope more of that continues, and definitely parents should be, and dance educators should be questioning these organizations that you're giving your money to. Are you going to have dance medicine professionals on site? People make changes based on feedback provided. So if they're hearing that feedback consistently from their paying customers, chances are you're going to see that implemented a lot more quickly, as you go forward. So be vocal about it. If that's something that's important to you, which at this point it should be to all of us, make sure you're vocalizing those things in a respectful way to these organizations so they can start thinking about how to implement these things at that level.
Yeah. And that comes up to another point we can make actually for dancers is learning how to advocate for yourself. You know, as you had mentioned a few minutes ago, like our generation, like we were taught, like if something was bothering you, you didn't talk about it. You didn't let people know. You pushed it to the side, you know, until it became so big that you literally couldn't do anything. And so the sooner we can teach our dancers to have that maybe a safe space with their teachers, with their educators, to come up and say, you know what, this is really bothering me today. Can I modify? Or, you know, can I take maybe a little step back? Or even my PT told me this is what I need to do. Having that ability as a teacher to say, okay, you can do what you need to do today. And I understand that there is a little bit of a like maturity that has to come with that, of understanding like what you are and what you aren't able to do. But I think being able to have that safe space to have open communication with your teachers is incredibly important.
But then on the flip side, I also feel like there's this whole segment of people that are like, okay, but like enough's enough. Like, I don't want to deal with like a bunch of whiny people who are always complaining that something's wrong. They always have to sit down. Like, you know, that they're afraid it's going to go too far the other direction. Right. So, you know, what do you say to those people, right? That, you know, you give people the freedom to advocate and then all of a sudden everybody's advocating and all the time. Then, you know, are we getting things done? Is it going to be expected that we almost over advocate and then it will all balance out in the end? Or is that silly to worry about?
I definitely think it's something to worry about. And I think this might be an interesting thing to consider, like having a dance medicine person who comes into your clinic even like once a month, right? And so the dancers can then go to that person, have an appointment set up and say, you know what, this has been bothering me, right? Then that becomes the safe space to kind of talk about your injuries, and your dance classes are the space to focus on dancing. And so that might be an initial step to making sure that a dancer feels that they can talk about what's bothering them, an injury, and they feel heard with it, but then they're still able to focus on their dance specific technique.
Well, and I love this idea because it really we talked last week about the fact that dance educators wear so many hats. And they're not necessarily qualified or licensed to do all of those things and do all those jobs. And having a dance medicine professional come into a convention space, a competition space, a studio space, really takes the responsibility and puts that on the dance medicine professional where it should be, instead of on the educator who is not qualified to diagnose these things or treat these things or maybe guess at what's going on, right? And it really takes that liability off the educator, really, if you look at it, or the organization, because then you've got a professional that's there that can field those concerns appropriately.
Yeah, I think that's that is so important. What was the message last week? Find a professional. That was one of the
let the professionals do their job.
Let the professionals do their job. Find a professional. Your homework is find a professional to give you appropriate information. For those of you who are just now joining us, we are talking to Dr. Kat Bowers about the misconceptions, miscommunications, all those things that happen between dancers and studio owners with dance medicine professionals. We have a comment from McKinney Movement Center over on Instagram. That's where I think cross training is super powerful with teachers and staff. So we've talked about cross training a number of times. Carlos Caballo, Sparks Caballo, I always mix his dance name up. Came in and talked to us about cross training. We've had a number of PTs. I think Melissa Buffer talked to us also about cross training as well. If you see earlier in the season, so cross training is so important, and I think that thank you so much for that, McKinney Movement Center. I'm sorry, I can't see. I'm going blind. about all my people who are here on Instagram. So I just want to talk a little bit about the disconnect. That's what I just talked about. So they're just, I don't even know how to explain the disconnect. It's like we want help, but we don't want to become whiny and lose our spots and lose our positioning in companies or in studios. But we want to advocate for ourselves, but not so much that we become a problem. It's just this huge disconnect. So, and it can be overwhelming at times when we take in all of this information, like eat right, cross-train, don't cross-train too much, Pilates is it. No, it's not, it's yoga. This is what you need to be doing. You should be running. No, you shouldn't. Like you're constantly getting this barrage of information. So what advice would you give dance professionals, students, parents about what do you digest? What do you spit out? How do you know what's good, what's not? How do you decipher?
Yeah, it's a hard thing. I know because I love to give information and I love to be like, you should be doing, our last episode we talked about like going into the new season and here's some screening things and this is what you should be strengthening and this is, all this kind of stuff. And, Dr. Davenport's great. She's really a grounding person for me. And she always comes back and she was like, we're putting a lot of information out there. Pick one or two of those things to implement, right? Instead of trying to add it all in there. And so I think that would be kind of like one thing I would start with is don't feel like you need to start running and cross conditioning and adding all these things in, but maybe you start with just like 3 or 4 exercises kind of on a regular basis. Put those into your plan and see how that does. And if that's still going well and you're feeling stronger, then maybe we add the next level. So that's really where I would start with how much information is out there. And then as far as like, what should I listen to? What shouldn't I listen to? Look into those people. Like, are they credible? Have they, do they have a degree? What's their background? What's their level of education? And make sure that they really do kind of have a strong background in being able to give out this information instead of just somebody who has no, like they've just maybe grown up in the dance community and don't have any training in anatomy and physiology and movement science and that kind of stuff. Maybe see if their information corresponds to what a medical professional has put out there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We had a McKinney Movement Center clarify their comment, which this is true too. I should have known that. That was so silly. Sorry, cross-training, meaning training staff and studio teachers to understand the complexity of dance medicine. So more so than cross-training your body, but understanding that, hey, this is how we want you to deliver information and teach technique, but also this is how we want you to help our dancers take care of our bodies and understand dance medicine and how it can support studios and dancers and not fight against teachers. So training programs, like I guess training programs for teachers about dance medicine, are those out there? Are those available?
Good question.
Good question. I have not looked into any specific like teacher training programs. I know it's to teach over in Europe, there is like an actual credentialing program that you have to go through to teach even just at like a studio level over there, which we don't have here. But I would say if you can build a relationship with a dance medicine specialist, an athletic trainer, a PT, an MD, build a team that's going to help support your dancers. And I know for myself as a PT, I've gone in and I've done lectures for studios, not just for the students, but for the faculty, right? And even injury prevention for the faculty is huge because guess what? Dance teachers are doing things on one. Rarely are they like demonstrating something on one side and then that's happening in our teachers. And so turning around and saying, let's educate our teachers also on how to stay healthy. What are common injuries to look out for? And maybe what kind of strengthening or cross training can you do?
Well, and I want to mention there's a lot of great programs out there too. One of them coming to mind is Sugarfoot Therapy, where you can actually get certified as a teacher. They're physical therapy exercises that were created by physical therapists and professional dancers. Katie Shar and her team over at Modi Physiotherapy, they do some great work there. And there's even like an online library where you can get those exercises to share with your dancers. So, like I know progressing ballet techniques is, the way they incorporate their training program has a lot of body awareness in that certification. And those are things that you can do as an educator to get certified and be able to bring back to your students. And again, we talk about this all the time. It's professional development. It's things that you can write off on that tax return, but there are things that are going to add value to the training you're bringing to your students and also enhance that idea of overall wellness and body awareness.
And to Dr. Bowers' point, I want to say, those trainings or exercises are out there, but it's very important as a dance educator that you don't hold yourself up to be a dance medicine professional because you watched a module or because you have the exercises. Those 100%. Are your entry
That's
level.
the biggest challenge. That's right. The biggest challenge is because you start getting those certifications, and because the dance world is not standardized, it doesn't have a governing body like over in Europe, or a structure on how we move through our levels, right? All of a sudden dance teachers are like, well, I'm just gonna, because I'm right here, it's easier, and I know this, so I'm gonna say this to you. And then we start blurring those lines, and that's almost the negative side of having those certifications is then I think we take the liberties and the freedoms to do things that we're not licensed to do because it's convenient, it's easy, it's quick, we're right there. And sometimes it's the better thing to just call on the dance medicine side and the professionals and let them do their job. But sometimes there's no time, or sometimes we think we got it figured out or whatever. So it is a double-edged sword.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we might have already touched on this because go ahead. Go ahead, Kat.
Oh no, I was just gonna say the amount of times the dancer's been like, oh yeah, I had my friend pull my ankle, or so and so cracked my back. Like those things, like we're trained to do those things. There's very specific ways we're doing those so that you don't end up with a bigger injury. So
right.
I know that you can crack your friend's back or your student's back, or try and like give them the ankle manipulation that everybody thinks is so cool, but there's really reasons behind exactly why we're doing those things. And so a little bit we do have to put some blinders on and say this is where I'm trained, and then knowing you need to refer to that next person is really important.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For those of you who are just now joining us, we are talking to Dr. Kat Bowers about the misconceptions, miscommunications between dance professionals, dance students, dance parents, and dance medicine professionals. So we got some great conversation going here. Please make sure you're dropping in the comments anything that you have. Thank you for joining us, McKinney Movement Center. Love the combo. Thank you so much for your compliments, and share, everyone. To that point, please share this episode. We do it for free, and we do it for the love of dance, and we do it for education. So if you're not sharing, it doesn't do anybody any good. Don't keep it to yourself. It's good news. Please.
Lots of dance. There's lots of dance teacher groups that need to have these conversations. So share.
Exactly.
Kat, talk a little bit about the 3 top misconceptions you see happening between dance professionals and educators versus dance medicine and science professionals.
I had to think long. I think I came up with I really came up with one big one, is that as dance medicine professionals, we're not out to change dance. We're here to enhance a dancer's longevity. I'm not here to change technique. I'm here to teach a dancer how to do what they love in the healthiest way for their body, coming from, you know, as a PT, coming from a very strong like biomechanics perspective, like manual therapy, like how do we keep your joints moving? How do we keep your muscles strong to support your joints? Not necessarily saying like, oh, you should change your, you know, you should change the way you're doing this completely just to fix how I think it should be. It's really about longevity of the dancer, because I want to see dancers dancing into their 40s and 60s if they want to still be taking classes and doing this kind of stuff. I think if it's ingrained deep inside you, you should be able to do this well into as long as you want, really.
And I do think that's key, because I think people get very offended when you come in and you say, hey, you know, there's a different way to do this. And they're like, no, absolutely not. You're trying to change everything. And it's actually, I'm trying to change this one thing. And it actually doesn't change the quality of the delivery of what you're doing. It actually makes it better. So I love that point. We're trying to improve performance, not necessarily change the way things are done.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I found is just open communication and coming into conversations between a teacher and a dance medicine professional with an open mindset. I know one thing that I talk a lot about, or I've tried to talk a lot about with some of our dance instructors, is how do we cue movement? And just giving a muscle specific cue, I want you to use this muscle, actually doesn't create the movement that we're usually looking for. And the more you can give kind of visual cues, we tend to see better movement quality. We see less restriction within the joint. We see just overall improved mechanics through the body. And so the one that I love to pick on is turn out from your inner thighs. Well, it's one of many, but if we actually look mechanically at what the inner thighs do, right? Those muscles pull your leg together, but they also internally rotate the femurs. So if you're telling somebody to rotate out from those inner thighs, it's actually do. So I would challenge you to say, maybe think about, can you spiral your legs out? Can you spiral that inner thigh forward? Is going to actually give increased activation into the rotators, which are in the back side of the hip, and allow that leg the freedom that you're looking for to come forward or to come side with that external rotation. And I've had a lot of pushback from educators when we start kind of talking into cues and technique and things like that, but understand, like, this was my background was in understanding motor control and combining it with dance, and how do we really create that optimized movement for our dancers.
Yeah. Was that 3? Do you have one more, or?
I think those were kind of the 2 that
lumped in together.
Those are 2 big ones.
I was making sure they're big ones. They are big ones.
Yeah.
And I love the visual cues, because I think, we talk about this all the time. The dance industry is just, a lot of it is you grow up and repeat what you were taught. And so those analogies that stick with you when you were a student, you become a teacher and you start saying those things to your students. It's kind of like being a parent. Like, you find yourself saying the same things that your mom and dad said to you, right? And so, but they're not, there's that in some ways, so many of those things are outdated, and we know so much more because chances are they got those things from somebody else, right? And so everything has just kind of been passed down. And there's so much more that we know now. And you really have to be careful on what you're saying, and constantly as an educator be asking yourself, is there a better, more descriptive way that I can say this, that the light bulb goes on? Because sometimes it's just words and they mean something to you, but they don't mean anything to this kid now. and there's a reason for that because it's a totally different time.
Mhm.
So I think that's a really
Yeah.
great, thing to point out.
Yeah. When we talk about language, I mean, I learned so much about language when I was actually doing my Pilates certifications, when I went through one of them. And really, I highly recommend the Eric Franklin books if you're looking for some more information on how to cue visually, because that's so
Hmm.
much of what he does. So, he actually has a dance conditioning book, and he has dynamic imagery through movement, where he gives you all, he talks about how do we actually create the cues, these visual cues, like, instead of saying tuck under, right, which I hope nobody's using anymore when we're talking about standing in neutral spinal alignment, right? I use a lot, like, imagine like you have air lifting up the front of your body or blowing up the front of your body, and think about water dragging down your back, pulling, like running down,
Mm.
and you want that water to run down towards your heels. And that all of a sudden it gives this feeling of lift in the front of the body that we're really looking for. And then this feeling of kind of a little bit of weight dropping down the back. And I find that that creates really good alignment
That's
for our
interesting.
dancers, at least when they're starting in the day, they're doing their plies and things like that. So, what are other things that you can think of to create these nice kind of full movements or change your alignment with something that might feel familiar or
And wouldn't it be
practical
great
to
if
your
we
students?
were developing these relationships within our community as educators with our dance medicine professionals, and we met with them before the start of every season and said, these concepts are really hard for my students to grasp. What are some
What are
things
some
that I
visual
could
cues?
say? What are some visual cues that I could say to them to make this work better? How can I get this to sink in? Because I know when I was teaching and directing, there's so much there's always the same things don't work for every student. And there's, the students that are like, this is just not sinking in. And, obviously you have to look at yourself and go, I'm not saying it right. Like, I'm not saying it correctly. There's got to be a better way to reach this child. What a great relationship to be able, and a thread to be able to pull on, to get together and say, help me
Mhm.
flesh this out. Help me get these words out in a way that's going to make sense to them. Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's and that's like I taught ballet classes for a while, but I taught Pilates classes for multiple years. And that was one thing, like, you had to learn how to cue an entire class of people. And we always said, like, have 2 or 3 different cues for everything that you're looking to change, right?
Mhm.
So that you always have something that you can pull out, and dance, when we actually look at it, it's a really interesting way, because a lot of times you're taught to do a movement, you execute and get feedback instead of necessarily giving feedback during the movement, to see if you can create the change during. So that goes into some like motor control, motor learning of like feed forward, feedback. So it's interesting even when you start digging into that and how to create change in movement that way.
Yeah.
Great point. I think we can go to homework, Bree.
Let's do it. So every week we give homework for you all we want to see progress, right? That's really what this is about. That's why we're doing this. That's what we all want as educators and parents and students. We want progress. So we like to give homework. So Dr. Kat, what is one thing you want to give our viewers and listeners, you want to challenge them with between now and next week? So 7 days to start working on right now, where they can see improvement in this way.
Okay, so I actually have 2, and we've kind of talked about both them, but the first one is just be open during conversations with any like dance medicine professional. And number 2 is I would challenge you to start building your team today. So reach out to a dance medicine professional. whether it's a nutritionist, a PT, a sports psychologist, anybody, even if it's just over Instagram, reach out to us. I mean, most of us are willing to help out in any way that we can.
So what do you advise people to say? Like if you've got because some people, believe it or not, it can be very overwhelming to think about cold reaching out to somebody that you've never met before. That can be a scary thing, or something that is intimidating for people. So what do you suggest? What is that verbiage? Like, what is that language when you make that initial, call as a dance educator and you want to start building out that team? And how do you know you're not calling? I mean, let's be honest, not all medical professionals are created equal. So how do you make sure that you're not calling like the quack?
Right.
That's
Who has
like,
no idea.
I don't
Went to
even know
YouTube
how
University.
this person is still in business.
Yeah, all really good questions. Cold calls are hard. I've done them as a PT, reaching out to studios, and I've gone in and I've had meetings, and then like nothing comes out of them. So it does happen, but I would say if you're a studio owner, or you're a dancer, call and just let them know who you are. Hi, my name's so and so from this studio, and I'm wondering, do you offer services to come in and talk with our students, or whatever you're interested in doing. I think if you can have a clear goal in your mind about what you need, that's going to be the best thing, right? So do you want to offer a class? Do you want to do an in-service for your teachers? Do you want to do any on-site visits? Do you want to do screenings, right? Maybe you just bring in somebody for like 1 or 2 days to do a quick movement screen on your dancers. Do you want to do pre-point screenings? Like, if you can start thinking about how you would see this person involved into this, I think it makes those cold calls a little bit easier to say, like, this is what I'm looking for, and can you be that person to fill those shoes? And then if you're not sure on somebody, you can always just look at their credentials, do something short term, maybe 1 or 2 visits. And if things don't work out, or you're like, this isn't the right fit, then you're not committed to something long term just yet.
I love that. And chances are, if it's somebody that recognizes, like, look, this is a whole group of people that maybe I wouldn't have been exposed to if I didn't explore this relationship, right? Like, they're going to jump at the chance to help and work with your dancers, because it's not only, helping you in your business, but it's also helping their own, right? In their own practice. So it would be really silly not to, that might be a red flag if you find somebody that doesn't take you up on that.
Right.
But in addition to Dr. Kat's homework, we also
and to be honest,
sorry, go ahead.
I would say, like, anybody who's like passionate or interested in getting into dance medicine is most likely going to be a great person, right? Somebody who's willing to learn. If they didn't grow up in the dance community, if they're open to learning, they want to know more, they're taking the right steps to kind of improve their own education on it, then I think you've got a good person.
Yeah, thank you. So you guys, you all have your homework, you have your tasks for the week. We always give you homework, which is to take that Beyond the Steps initiative course. It's a 4-part course module that you can take at your own pace. Each segment was created and curated by experts in each field. We're tackling things like racism, gender and equity, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, and of course, dance medicine and science. But again, it's base level, foundational, evidence-based research for you to start your journey to make progress and create a safer, happier, healthier dance space for your dancers and for your staff and for you. And that's really what we're looking for more than ever at this point. So take that course. You can go at your own pace, and Melissa's going to drop that link in all the places. so we have that. And then yes, before we do that, I also get YPAD certified. Youth Protection Advocates in Dance, or YPAD.org. They are doing great work to keep kids happy, healthy, safe in dance, and they provide those teacher certifications that we talked about earlier. We're giving you 25% off with the code Apollo25. Again, Melissa's dropping that link and the code in the threads, so check those out. And then finally, Kat, tell us how people can find you. Do you work with studios? And if so, how can they reach you? This is a great time because we're getting into starting that new season. So remind everybody how they can follow you and get a hold of you.
Yeah, so I think my way of sharing my information with everybody is through the Dance Docs podcast. So we're on pretty much every major platform: Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, all of that. You can find us. You can also find us at thedancedocs.com is our webpage. Docs. And then me specifically, you can find me through my webpage, drkatbauerpt.com is the best way to find me. And you can just click the link to contact me there, and I will get your emails and get back to you. And if you're a studio owner, anything like that, you're just looking for some guidance, please feel free to reach out on any of those platforms. They all come in through me. And I'm more than happy to help you make sure that your dancers are moving into this season in the healthiest way possible.
Amen to that. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much.
It is so hard to believe that we are at the end of our Beyond the Steps season and at the beginning of a new dance season. I feel like it flew by just like that. Thank you so much, Dr. Bowers, for being here. Thank you, Bree, for being here. She's in a different setting, y'all. She's doing some maxing and relaxing in Northern Michigan this weekend.
But working, lots of working in between. But it's the hashtag summer hard. We're trying to get it in.
Right, exactly. But thank you so much for joining me and being my partner in this. We are up to our last show of season 2 next week, next Friday at 2 p.m. We, as we always do at the end of the season, are going to recap our favorite moments of the season. So it'll be a show of myself and Bree talking through some of the amazing moments, the best learning moments, the most pivotal aha moments that we had during season 2, and talking a little bit about what you can see coming up in season 3, which will start in the first week of October. But until then, please share this episode and any others that you possibly can. You can find them all on Paula Performance Facebook page in the video section. You can also find them on Turning Point at TPDC_on_IG in my bio, a link to YouTube, where all of the episodes are there as well. So this one and all the others, please share. We would love to have this information as far and wide as we can possibly have it. Until then, everyone, until next week, Bree and I are going to be feverishly writing about all of our wonderful things that we want to highlight.
Oh, Lord.
I know we have a lot. I mean, it is.
I got to go back, rack the brain a little bit.
Exactly. Way back. But until then, we hope that you will continue your journey beyond the steps. See you next week, everyone.
Bye.